At this point, we've explored each step of the universal creative process, from the beginning, identifying goals, to making plans and implementing. Our goal all along the way is to improve your creative thinking, and to do so by learning and practicing deliberate strategies, deliberate cognitive strategies, thinking tools, adding a variety of tools to your toolkit. But how do you make decisions about what tools to use? The goal of this lecture is to develop higher-level thinking skills, meta-process skills, if you will. We'll learn searching for success zones and assessing a situation. Let's start by looking at the framework of our toolkit, the thinking skills that we've been exposed to and the steps that we've learned. So in this universal creative process we refer to as creative problem solving, we went from clarify, which is identifying the challenges that we have to address in order to get to our goals. We then went to the ideate step of the process, where we learned to generate many ideas, and we learned a variety of tools in this area to help us to be more effective ideators. We then went into the develop step, which is all about turning a good idea into a great solution. And then most recently, we looked at implement, which is giving our solutions legs. It's thinking about what we need to do to successfully bring this proposed change, this solution, to the world so that it will be embraced. In each of these steps, we have a different way of thinking. In clarify, we consider this strategic thinking, which is the ability to sense the problem, identify the key issues, and to see the paths that will move you toward your desired future. When we go into the ideate step, we're engaging in ideational thinking. It has a sense of, or a focus on divergent thinking especially. The ability to produce a variety of original options, images, or thoughts that address the challenges. In the next step, we have to evaluate our ideas. The skill here is the ability to evaluate and transform a broad idea into a specific workable solution that resolves the challenge. And then the last skill, the tools that we learned in the implement step, help us to think tactically, to be creative when it comes to thinking about the tactics necessary to be successful. This ability is the ability to devise and carry out a plan that includes specific, measurable steps for attaining your desired future. Tools and skills can be used independently, outside of this creative thinking process, in a way much like we've learned these tools. Or the tools can be woven together. They can be sequenced to help us to move along a project, if you will. Like building a fine piece of furniture, we string the tools together into a process. We begin with drafting tools, then measuring tools, then cutting tools, building tools, and finishing tools. Used in this sequence, it helps us to be successful in that project. Now, the same is true for the creative problem-solving process. We can use the tools independently. We can pull one tool out and use it, or we can sequence the tools in an order, a procedure that follows from the beginning, identifying a goal, all the way through to the end with an action plan, and then monitoring that action plan. But what links these steps of the process? We really haven't looked at how we make the transition from one step to another. So let's look at what bridges these steps within this process. When we begin and clarify, we're looking at our goal, identifying the data, and then moving to challenges that we recognize we must address in order to achieve our goal. The output, the bridge from clarify, what sets you up for ideate, is a clear challenge statement. How to, how might, in what ways might, or what might. Now in ideate, we generate lots of possibilities against that challenge. These are possible solutions. What helps us to move from ideate to develop? How do we know when we can step through that gate? Well, it's when we have a tentative solution. The bridge from ideate to develop is a sense that we're moving towards a solution that will work. We use the invitational stem, what I see myself doing, when we leave the ideate step and we move into develop. In this way, we move into develop with a proposed solution. In develop, we evaluate it. As a result, we hope to refine it and perfect it. The outcome of the develop step is a proposed solution, something that we're really committed to. In fact, we use that language to set ourselves up for the implement. We move to the implement step when we have that statement, what I am committed to do. It's something that you have great energy for and you want to carry forward. Through the implement step, we create our action steps, and we leave implement when we have our action plan together. And then we continue to monitor. But in a way, we never really leave creative problem solving behind, because as we're implementing, as we're taking action, sometimes things don't go the way we expect. And therefore, we may need to go back into our toolkit and use a tool that helps us to resolve an emerging situation. Now, how do we use this model? You can go in sequence, step by step, as I've just described it. You can move back and forth among the steps. We can combine the steps in any way in order to suit our needs. In order to do this, we need to be able to stand above the process and look at it. This is called metacognition. Metacognition is the ability to think about your thinking. By being able to stand above the process and looking at it, we can better manage our way through it. In De Bono's 6 hats, he has a metacognitive hat. It's called the blue hat, which stands above the other hats, and we use it to organize the other hats. In this universal creative process, creative problem solving, we use something called diagnostic thinking, which is gathering data and then determining where to begin in the creative problem solving process, and then how to move around in this process. Let me give you an analogy. In this course, we've been working on the mechanics of your car, so to speak. In the car, we have the engine, and we've been improving the horsepower by giving you tools that help you to be more effective at divergent thinking. So we've made a more powerful engine. We've also worked on the braking system by giving you tools for convergent thinking. Well, that's wonderful. Now we have a beefed up car, but how do we maximize the mechanics of our car? Well, we need to improve the driver skills. To do that, there's a meta step in creative problem solving, a 5th step, if you will, that stands above the others. It's called assessing the situation. This is where we use diagnostic thinking to improve our driving skills, to be more conscious about how we maneuver and move around in this process. In assessing the situation, we do 2 things. We first determine, is creative problem solving a fit? We don't use creative problem solving or creative thinking for every problem. So we begin by diagnosing whether our problem deserves creative thinking or calls for creative thinking. And then if we decide it does require creative thinking, the next element within this step, assessing the situation, we have to diagnose the entry point. Yes, we're committed to use creative thinking, but what's the best way to use this process? You have lots of tools. Do you choose them randomly? No, it's best to choose the tool that best fits the task. We'll learn and practice several meta tools, and it's best if you participate with me. So I encourage you to think along with me as I go through these tools, and at certain points I'll invite you to participate. In fact, let's begin by having you think about some goals or wishes. Quickly make a list, either with pen and paper, or a computer, or like J.K. Rowling, in your head. And you can even go back to past lists if you have those handy. I'll ask you some questions if you don't have goals immediately in mind, just to jog your thinking. So what have you done lately that you wish you could do better? What challenges have been on your mind lately? What would you like to do to accomplish within, let's say, the next 6 months? What would you like to accomplish within a calendar year? Let's think in bigger terms. What are your dreams? What are your personal aspirations? What are your professional aspirations? What wishes would you like to have come true? Again, if you need time, go ahead and take the time necessary to respond to those questions. And we'll look at a way that we can take our list of goals and we can converge. We're not going to apply this now. There are 3 criteria, the 3 I's. You were introduced to these earlier. Influence. Do you own the problem? Are you the chief decision maker? Imagination. This is the crucial question in terms of creativity. Are you really looking for something new? Is the answer already out there? If it's already out there, you don't need creative thinking. Are you really looking for novelty? That helps us to figure out whether you are indeed looking for imagination. The 3rd I is interest. Is it a priority? Do you want to work on this? Are you motivated? And let me add a 4th I. If you have goals that meet these 3 I's, an additional sorter can be immediacy. How urgent is it for you? Now, these 3 I's with the additional I of immediacy help us to choose whether creative problem solving is a good fit for the problem or not. Let's look now at a more advanced tool. It's called searching for success zones. Here's the purpose. We identify wishes and goals with the greatest probability of success. That's what we want to have happen as a result of using this tool, searching for success zones. It informs us as which goal will be most likely to bring me success. Here are the steps. We evaluate the options against the degree of importance. On a 1 to 9 scale, 1 being low, not important, to 9 being highly important, extremely important to you. Then we evaluate the options against probability of success on the same kind of scale, 1 to 9. 1 being low, success will be difficult and unlikely, and 9 being high, success is highly likely. Then we plot these results on a grid so that we have a visual map of where they fall. And as we plot them, there's information on the grid that helps us to determine whether it's a goal we should pursue or not. We can consider the results of this and then we make a decision. Now, I had asked you to participate and I'd asked you to think about some goals and some wishes. I hope that you did that. I'd like you to choose one, a goal or a wish that just immediately comes to mind, either looking at your list or pops into your mind as you consider the question. And rate it on degree of importance and on probability. Ask yourself, how important is this goal for me? 1 to 9. What's the probability of success? Again, 1 to 9. Now let's take that information and let's use that information to put it within the success zones graph. Now the way this graph works is it's organized along the bottom for probability of success. And we take our number and that fits into one of 3 areas, either low, moderate, or high. Low probability of success, moderate probability of success, or a high probability of success. Low would be a score of 1 to 3. Moderate is 4 to 6. High, 7 to 9. We do the same thing for degree of importance, which we place along the vertical axis from low to high, blocked out low, moderate, and high. This creates a 3 by 3 matrix. Let me interpret the combination of these 2 axes. So when we have a situation that has a low probability of success, you had ranked it 1 to 3, and the degree of importance is low as well, we call this kind of a scenario self-abuse. Why do it? Why pursue it? If you put energy into it, it's going to be a waste. If we have a scenario, goal, think about your goal, that has a probability of success that's low, and our degree of importance is moderate, this is what we refer to as a difficult endeavor. It's not very likely to be successful, and it's moderately important or valuable to you. It's going to take some energy to do. If you have something that's low in terms of probability of success and high in terms of degree of importance, Boy, that's a creative challenge. It's something that needs to happen. It's highly important, but it's going to take a lot of imagination to get there, to make it happen. Let's move to the next area within this success zones. Again, be thinking about your wish, the one that you identified. Where is it in terms of probability of success? Is it moderately, did you rate it as a moderate degree of probability of success? Let's look at the next scenario. So if the probability of success is moderate and the degree of importance is low, why bother? You might be successful, but why put energy into it? It's really not that important to you. The next, we call this the gray area, sort of falls right in between all the others, where we have a moderate probability of success and we have a moderate degree of importance. That can be pushed in any direction. Moderate probability of success and a high degree of importance, that's a stretch goal. So it's moderately probable that we're going to be successful, and we're really seeing it as something as important that moves us out of our comfort zone into a learning zone, into a stretch goal area. Let's move to probability of success is really high. The degree of importance is low. Yeah, you can be successful, but why pursue it? It's a distraction. It's not really that important to you. It's a waste of energy. It takes you away from other more important things that you can be doing. If the probability of success is high, and the degree of importance is moderate, we call that low-hanging fruit. It's likely to be successful and it's sort of valuable to you. You can easily pick that off the tree. And then in our last scenario, we have what we call promising opportunities. These are scenarios, these are goals, these are wishes that are both high in probability of success and high in degree of importance. Those areas within this success zone that really require the most creative thinking are the creative challenges, the stretch goals, and the promising opportunities. Here's where we might bear the greatest fruit. So what's the value in this? Well, it helps you to set priorities, a priority focus on what's really important. Sometimes we pursue something only to find out later that it was a waste of our time. Our time would have been better spent elsewhere. This tool helps us to overcome that. It can be used individually, and it can be used in teams as well. In fact, it's a terrific way to build consensus and commitment towards goals. Let's say we're generating our goals for the year. We've generated our goals. We can then put them into the Searching for Success Zones matrix, and we can see which ones are most promising to pursue. And we can see where the consensus is around that. It helps to ensure resources are invested wisely. So through this kind of diagnosis, you determine if creative problem solving is necessary and the kinds of problems you want to bring into creative problem solving. So now that you've determined this, the next question is, where do I begin in creative problem solving? Now, the process has a natural progression to it. You begin with clarify, and you have to have the challenge before you go to ideas, and you have to have the idea before you develop, and you have to have the solution before you implement. So there is a natural sequence to it. But the process can be used flexibly, and you can start anywhere. If you need the screwdriver, and it's in the bottom drawer of your toolbox, you don't have to go through every drawer before the bottom drawer using each tool in order to get to the screwdriver. We can jump into this process at whatever point we need, going into, if you will, the tool drawer that's most appropriate for the task that we're working on. And we can move around as necessary. To do this, again, diagnostic thinking helps us. Here's a tool that will help us to be able to do that. It's within assessing the situation. It's called the cheat sheet for diagnostic thinking. I'm going to describe to you 4 different scenarios. And by looking at those scenarios, it's sort of an if-then graph, you'll be able to determine if that is the place to start in creative problem solving. So when you come up against a scenario that sounds like this, if the problem is unclear, and you need to identify the specific barriers or obstacles that are in the way of achieving a goal. You begin in the clarify step. You start with a goal statement, beginning with, wouldn't it be great if, or I, or we wish, and then you move through that step of the process. Let's look at another if scenario. If you have identified a specific challenge that must be addressed in order to achieve the goal, then you're ready for the ideate step. How do you start in this step? Well, you start here with a challenge statement that begins with how to, how might, in what ways might, or what might. In the next scenario, we're setting ourselves up for the develop step. So if you're dealing with a task that sounds like this, you have an idea and you need to have it transformed into a workable solution, then you can enter this process at the develop step. How do you start? You start with a summary of the tentative solution. What I see myself doing is, or what we see ourselves doing is. And then the fourth if scenario statement, if you have a proposed solution and you wish to carry it forward, you're committed to this, you're ready to go, you don't need to explore any other options, you're in the implement step. Here we start with a description of the proposed solution. I or we are committed to. So let's try this out. I'm going to ask you to participate. I'm going to ask you to engage in diagnostic thinking, practicing this skill of metacognition, standing above the process, using these 5 scenarios that I just described to you, and taking situations, examples of problem situations, which I'll describe, and use the information that I just shared with you to see if you can find out if creative problem solving is appropriate, and if so, where you would begin. This is going to sort of be multiple choice. I'm going to read 5 options to you. One option isn't appropriate to creative problem solving. The other 4 scenarios I'll read to you are appropriate, and you can decide then which process step you would begin with. I'll give you a little bit of time to reflect between each one, but feel free to pause the lecture if you need more time. So, here's the first scenario. Donna and her team are responsible for professional development. They surveyed various topics and have narrowed the choices for this year's program down to 2. Both options are good, but given budget and time constraints, they can only focus on one. There are advantages and disadvantages to both options. How might they decide what's best for their organization? Now, would you use creative problem solving on this? Could you use creative problem solving? If so, where would you begin in the process? As I look at this scenario, my reaction to this would be, you could begin in the develop step. Donna and her team have narrowed the options down to 2 choices. They really don't need to explore other choices. They're committed to these 2. They simply have to choose one that fits the organization well, that's going to work best for the organization. So perhaps a tool like Point might be useful. Pluses, opportunities, issues, and new thinking. Let's try another scenario. For unknown reasons, Acme Inc. is experiencing some morale issues among its employees. It seems that the low morale is contributing to some unproductive behavior. The goal is clear, that is, they wish to increase morale, but they're not sure how to get started. What would you recommend? Is this appropriate for creative problem solving? And if so, what step would you use? What drawer within the toolkit would you go into? If I were working on this problem and I was working with Acme, I think I would recommend to them the clarify step. The issue of morale is very vague. They know that that's a goal they want to work on to improve, but where would they start? They need specific challenge statements. They need to gather data first and then to use the data to help identify those specific challenges. Here's the next scenario. Jim is going to teach a unit on World War II. It's the first time he has taught this particular material. His social studies book provided some information on the subject, but he needs to get some more details. He's especially interested in information on Neville Chamberlain's peace treaty with Adolf Hitler. What would you do? What would you recommend? Is creative problem solving appropriate? If so, where would you begin? As I look at this scenario, my reaction is, well, gosh, I think Jim can just do the research. I'm not sure that creativity and creative thinking is necessary. So I'm not sure creative problem solving would serve him well in this particular situation. Let's look at the next example. Pat's department has developed a new service to be offered to others inside the organization. It's a large organization and they want to use this new program to grab the attention of colleagues. They will be using standard internal communication systems to announce this new service, but feel strongly that an imaginative name will be necessary to make it stand out. Pat has decided to conduct a meeting during which the team will search for potential names for the new service. What would you recommend? Is creative problem solving useful for Pat? If so, where would you start? In this case, if I were working with Pat, I would recommend holding an ideation session. The challenge is clear. They have this new service and they recognize that in order to get attention, they want to have an imaginative name. So we could hold a brainstorming session or use some other ideation tools for that exact purpose of generating imaginative names. Here's our last scenario. Jan's team has identified a new idea that they believe will be a real game changer for their organization. They have developed the idea and tested it with some customers. The reaction has been very positive. However, they know that some key internal groups will resist the idea. Is this appropriate for creative problem solving? How might creative problem solving be used? If I were working with Jan, my recommendation would be to go into the implement step. They've got a solution, they've begun to test it, they've gotten positive reactions from customers. They think, however, there'll be some resistance to this from inside of the organization. So they could begin to look at how to sell the solution, the product or new service, whatever it is, how they might gain buy-in in order to successfully take action. They could use a tool like stakeholder analysis, for example. So we've gone through 5 scenarios, sort of testing out our metacognitive skills. There are some common metacognition mistakes that beginning learners tend to make when they do this kind of diagnosis. Beginning learners tend to see almost all situations as though they need ideas. They tend to diagnose the situation, the problem, into the ideate step. It's a problem, so we need ideas. They also make assumptions that the problem as initially presented, the problem as given, is the true problem, and tend not to challenge what others say or how the problem presents itself to him or her. The third is accepting the challenge statement that's too vague, too broad. Remember, earlier I talked about this is kind of like trying to boil the ocean. When you have a very vague problem statement, a very vague challenge statement, you have, therefore, vague ideas. Your ideas are everywhere. The consequence of any of these 3 mistakes is wasted time, often requiring the need to cycle back into the process, generally going back to clarify. I'd like you to take more of your wishes and goals and locate them in the Searching for Success Zones matrix. We tried it out on 1. Try it out on a larger set. And then reflect on this. Make some decisions. As you look at these goals and they're laid out in your matrix, what should you do? What should you pursue? What should I not do? What should I stop doing? What's missing that I should be doing? Does it tell you what goals might still need to be generated? Practice metacognition. Practice diagnosis. Listen to others. When you're in a meeting or in a conversation with the family and a problem is being discussed, ask yourself, does this require creative thinking? If I were to apply creative problem solving to this, where would I begin in creative problem solving? What tools might I use? As you become more adept, it will indicate greater mastery of this higher order thinking skill. As you improve your metacognition, you improve the skill of choosing the right tool and the right process step to use. You become a better driver of your own mind, of your own creative thinking. And this is really sharpening your saw, really arranging every tool in your toolkit.